You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hey, patrons.
Hey, everybody, this is Bob Steenstra, and Matt and I were just teasing about how I jump in and take over some hosting jobs
like
sometimes.
You just did there, Bob.
Oh, okay, want to do the clap again?
No. Let's just take it from here. You've already stolen the show, so why don't you go ahead and give us the intro today? Oh, now he's quiet. Now he's silent. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we had Scott Hartwig on. Scott Hartwig, as you all know, I mean, I don't need to describe who he is. His reputation precedes him. He's been on the show before on the free feed, on the bonus episode about Killer Angels versus the movie Gettysburg. And I'm sorry, Killer Angels and the movie Gettysburg versus reality there for based on his book, Killer Angels Companion. And I had him come in today because I found several months ago
Scott was the chief interpretive historian.
I just said his reputation precedes him.
Yeah, but some people wouldn't listen to all
you want me to look him up here? Let me get his.
Most important, he's Barb Sanders' husband.
That is the most important part.
Barb Sanders works for the National Park Service too. She runs the education program. She's just a wonderful person.
Yes,
and Scott is just finishing writing. I think he's on the final chapters.
Here, Bob, why don't I just go to his website and I'll read you his bio, okay? We're just going to go to About Scott here. Okay, so Scott Hartwig, let's see. He retired from the National Park in January of 2014. He's authored numerous articles, one of which we talk about today, essays and books on the Civil War, or Civil War subjects, I should say. And he's appeared on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, Pennsylvania Cable Network. And I auditioned for him for a Park Service produced video back in probably 2009, 2010, and he didn't give me the part.
Oh,
that's the first time I met Scott.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, well, clearly he wasn't, or maybe he was thinking we want this to be good.
Back in those days, you had a reputation to live down.
Maybe that's what it was. I'll have to ask him next time. Anyway, so his most recent publication is To Antietam Creek, the Maryland Campaign from September 3rd to September 16th. It's an 800-page in-depth study of the campaign up to the eve of battle. Up to the eve of the Battle of Antietam. It's published in September 2012 by Johns Hopkins University Press. He's currently working on the sequel,
which means the battle itself.
Which is finally the battle. Actually, no, it's just the 2 hours before the battle, right where the last book leaves off. No, of course, it's the battle itself, and then I'm assuming the aftermath as well. And he's told us today that he's still working on it. He's on the 9th Corps attack, I think he said, right?
Yeah, which is
Burnside's
the last stage of the attack.
So he's getting there. He's getting there. And which is good, because I'm going to get them both together, and then I'm going to read them both after I'm done with all my Gettysburg stuff.
Yeah, and we're hoping he'll come maybe this summer and do one of the tours for the cleanup.
Spring.
We're hoping.
April.
Yeah,
I just asked him about that. He's going to get back to me. So hopefully that'll be the case there. But anyway, we talked about his blog post from the National Parks blog back in, what did I say, 2011?
It was 9 years ago.
It was 2011, May 26, 2011. It's called A Mystery Solved. And there's 3 parts to that. It's about the photographs that are labeled A Harvest of Death by Alexander Gardner. It's a very famous photograph of several Union troops splayed out there, all bloated, tongue swollen, really sad looking. With some, I guess a burial detail off in the distance there, kind of in the mist in the background. He spent about I think it was like 30 years, he said, or something like that.
Time.
Trying to figure out where exactly this was.
Yeah, these are the.
And as you point out, go ahead,
Matt.
No. Now I turn it over to you, Bob.
So the guru of this topic, photography at Gettysburg, William Frazanito, who wrote the book Gettysburg: A Journey in Time.
Right. These
are the only 2 photographs in the book that Frazanito says he cannot find where the camera was.
Right.
And so Scott thinks he's solved where that camera angle
says he's 98% sure. Mm-hmm. There have been some critics. He points out that our buddy Tim Smith and Gary Edelman did a debunking video, but Scott had his.
You've arrived when you have people like Tim Smith and Gary Edelman.
That's right.
Do a video on this same topic.
That's right. Yeah. So it's very interesting. And then, of course, as is the normal situation here on the show, we kind of go all over the place with topics. One topic leads to another, and of course, it's very interesting. I love having Scott on, and let's get to it right now so that all of you can hear it and learn from the great Scott Hartwig. All right, so the article is A Mystery Solved. There's 3 parts. It's on the Gettysburg National Military Park blog. You wrote it in 2011, but it, let's see, looks like it's kind of been, until that point, a lifetime search for you at that point. What got you interested in these photographs, in particular the ones that you're talking about in the article here?
It was the fact that we didn't know who they were, and we didn't know where it was.
Okay.
And I was always interested in not being, I did not care to be the guy who found where the picture was taken. That in some ways wasn't that important to me.
Okay.
What was more important to me was who were these people? Where was this? And let's give some identity.
So it was find the place so we can name the guy, or not name, but identify the guy.
Or identify who they probably are.
Right, okay.
And that was what I was most interested in because, for most of my professional life, I mean, they were just props on a stage, and they were real people.
Right.
And they got killed in the Battle of Gettysburg, and they're buried on the field, and we don't even know who they are. And, the photographer, Gardner, and the others who were with him, whether they documented where they were, they kept a journal or diary or something like that. I imagine that they probably did. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing written that they wrote down that said, here's where we were at this time, and these are the people that we photographed. And I think they were in a hurry, for one thing. And they were interested, Gardner was particularly interested in photographing the dead. Which is, it becomes interesting when you think about, okay, if these photographs were taken on the first day's battlefield, it doesn't seem to make any sense to me that Gardner and his guys would load up their wagon and they would drive down the Chambersburg Pike past the Lutheran Seminary, which is crowded with wounded from the battle, and not even pause to take any pictures there. They just keep on going into town and then ride south of town and start taking pictures down around the wheat field and Rose Hill and the Trossel Farm and everything like that. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense if they were coming to photograph important places on the battlefield, which at that point, I'm not sure anybody would have been interested in spending the time because everybody was pretty busy.
Sure.
You're either preparing to move if you're in the Army, or you've got a job, a really unpleasant job of burying the dead on the battlefield, or you're busy dealing with the wounded, and a photographer
is a nuisance.
Yes, and also if what you're interested in is the dead, then you have to go where the dead are.
Right.
And they had already buried a fair number of the dead on the field by the time he gets here on July the 5th. So I think it's possible, we don't know this. I mean, it's possible if he goes out on the first day's field, he photographs Union dead, because that would be almost the only place he could have found any Union dead by July the 5th.
Sure, because the Union was south of town for 2 days. So the first guys are going to bury are the ones that they can see right in front of them, right?
Right, and they're also going to bury their dead who are behind their lines or within their lines.
Sure.
So they're going to bury their own dead, like the dead from Pickett's charge and some of the second day's fighting. But the other thing is that for the dead who are on Sickles' line, which is the Emmetsburg Road leading back towards Cemetery Ridge and Little Round Top, the 5th Corps on July the 5th had advanced out to the Emmetsburg Road. And they had bivouacked on the Emmetsburg Road, and they had built breastworks from the fence rails along the Emmetsburg Road. And then on the morning of the 5th, or actually they did that on the night of the 4th, on the morning of the 5th, the Corps began to move. They sent details from the road eastwards to begin to bury the dead. So by the time Gardner gets there, it's probably not till the afternoon when he gets down, because Fresnito has that he probably took a lot of those images on Rose Hill, the most famous images, the Confederate dead on July the 5th. By the time he gets down there, the Union dead are largely buried. But I also think you only want so many images of Union dead.
Right.
You're more interested in images now of Confederate dead. And I think there's a reason why he's not pausing in the fields near the Emmitsburg Road to photograph Confederate dead, because there were plenty of Confederate soldiers who got killed out in that area on the second and the third day, is because they've been buried already. But the area that they haven't reached and haven't started to bury yet is that area down towards the wheat field in Rose Hill. So I think that's why he ends up going down there. And no doubt he probably had some contacts in the Army, I'm sure, and some of these people were probably telling him where he should go if that's what he's looking for to take photographs of.
Right.
Let me back up here.
Okay.
This is Bob, by the way. Just to provide for the listener some background.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that. Yeah. Go ahead.
We're talking about, first, the name Fresnito was mentioned. This is William Fresnito, who wrote a book back in the 1970s, I think, called Gettysburg: A Journey in Time. And a great book where he takes a modern view of many of the most famous photographs from Gettysburg, and a modern in the 1970s, and compares it and shows you in the book the same view of the dead or whatever it was he was taking a picture of. You're mentioning this man Gardner, Alexander Gardner, who's coming up. For those of you who don't know, there's that famous photograph reproduced at the Wayside exhibit at Devil's Den of the quote sharpshooter question mark on the Wayside. That was an Alexander Gardner photograph. That's the one that some people think there's a ghost story about because the ghost of the man. I don't buy all this stuff, but this was pretty clear case, according to Fresnito, that it was a body that was moved about 40 yards. So just trying to get the listener to understand the area we're talking about. That Devil's Den was the left end of General Sickles' 3rd Corps. And if you head west from there, the first big road you come to is the Emmitsburg Road. Gardner is advancing up from the southwest on the Emmitsburg Road. And it had always been my understanding, of course that was informed by Fresnito, that then they will leave the Emmitsburg Road and begin to work their way east to take these photographs. Having said that, in Fresnito's excellent book, he does say, and these photographs that we're talking about are at the end of this book, he does admit that he has never found where these pictures were taken or where the exact camera was.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what first alerted you to start looking or not, but I'm really impressed if you already knew ahead of time that wasn't that no one knew that. I wouldn't have known that.
Well, what I'd say is Fresnito's book was a groundbreaking book. I mean, his book on Gettysburg and Antietam, and then he did one on the Overland Campaign. I mean, they were all groundbreaking books because they made history come alive for people. Because you could go out there on the battlefield with this historic image, and he was an intelligence officer in Vietnam. And he brought that skill of being an intelligence officer to his application of trying to figure out where these photos were taken. And there's one photograph of Confederate dead down on Rose Hill, which is near the wheat field on the second day's battlefield, that for many, many, many years was always identified as dead of the 24th Michigan near what's called McPherson's Woods, but was actually owned by a farmer named John Herbst Woods. And Fresnito conclusively established that photograph was of Confederate dead and where it was taken because he was able to identify the exact location. So, I mean, the work that Fresnito did was really remarkable stuff. But I would say definitely his book interested me in these photos. And then when I started working at Gettysburg National Military Park in 1979, of course, people I was working with, we talked about the photos all the time. And there was always in the back of my mind an interest in, boy, I would love to know where those photos were taken. So to kind of back up and for the listener to see how I arrived at where I think this whole thing happened. The history of it is that I get to Gettysburg in 1979, work as a seasonal, get hired eventually as a permanent, and Eventually, I became the supervisory historian at the park there. And throughout the years, we were super busy all the time. I had a lot of stuff to do, so I wasn't like running around the field trying to find where these photos were taken. But sometimes at lunchtime or whatever, if I have some time, I go out there with the pictures and I would walk around. And I was convinced.
Hello, Getty's Nerds. It's Matt, and I hope you enjoyed that preview of our premium content that can now be found over at patreon.com. I just want to let you know that Addressing Gettysburg will always have free content for you to listen to in the forms of our narrative episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville and the upcoming episode entitled Invasion, June 1863, appendix episodes, and our wildly popular Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes. But episodes like Antietam to Chancellorsville take months to produce, as things are now. I hear from people almost every day asking how long until the next episode is finished. And the answer is, when I have the time, I can do it. Your support at Patreon can cut down the time it takes to produce an episode by months. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe the Ask a Gettysburg Guide episodes are what you like, but they leave you wanting to learn more. Well, fear not. More is what Patreon is all about. Patrons receive access to new premium episodes each week. These episodes are straight interviews or discussions with licensed battlefield guides, rangers, local historians, academics, authors, public historians, people from the Gettysburg community who do impressive things, and frankly, just about anyone who can talk on a subject related to Gettysburg. I want to make sure that the interest you already have in Gettysburg is enriched with our premium content. Your support means the world to me, because that means it will be easier to produce content that will bring Gettysburg to more people and, hopefully, more people to Gettysburg. And the podcast episodes are just the beginning. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg and become a patron. I thank you in advance.